Welcome back to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Elfrink, the head of marketing over here at Empire Flippers. And today we're going solo again. We're doing another podcast of just Greg's thoughts. I believe should be the second one. It was supposed to be the first one, but Greg messed up the audio and I have to basically talk about it again. So, in this episode, I thought it'd be pretty fun to discuss something that I think about a lot, that I think a lot of people don't. And I think the way people think about this subject when they do think about it actually makes their business a lot weaker. And this is a bit of perfect timing because we're about a week or two after the Alex Hormozi webinar launch. So I think this is a very good time to discuss this subject. It's something I see a lot of my friends do in the B2B world. And honestly, I think it keeps their businesses small and makes their businesses more stressful. And I think Mr. Hormozi would probably agree with me. And of course, I am talking about, as you probably figured out from the title, why personal brands suck. And now, before I go into that, we should go into a little bit about what just happened over the last couple of weeks. Now, people often say if you want to make a lot of money, focus on building an audience first and selling to them later. Now, I think this is completely backwards. And I used to believe in this. I used to think this was right. I no longer think this is very good advice for the vast majority of entrepreneurs. I think it sounds really nice and it can be a bit deep, but at surface level only. Once you go a little bit deeper, it starts breaking down. But of course, we have Alex Hormozi here, who is probably like arguably the biggest B2B like influencer, like personal brand out there, at least when it comes to the marketing world for sure and direct response in general. The guy's an absolute legend when it comes to direct response. So let's break down a little bit about what happened there. So Hormozi did a massive webinar funnel. I think he was spending like 250 grand a day on Facebook ads. I don't know if that's true. It's just what I heard through the grapevine, which doesn't surprise me considering he got like thousands of people to show up to a webinar, which is very, very, very difficult. And then he went and did this massive book launch, became a Guinness Book World Record, I believe, for selling a nonfiction business book. I believe he hit that goal. And one of the ways he hit that goal was by positioning an offer for $6,000 where you buy 200 books from him and you like donate his tax write-off. It was kind of weird positioning, but it worked. It worked really well for him, right? So he got that. And that wasn't even the high ticket offer. That was like the mid-tier offer. I believe there was one other offer on the back end of his webinar funnel that was like $25,000 to join his like personal like school community and I think a meetup in Vegas, something like that. So this webinar funnel, everyone is a buzz in the internet marketing world, at least in my communities, they are. You know, a lot of people throwing hate on it, a lot of people saying this is amazing, he's a genius, all this stuff. But when it comes down to it, like what Hormozi did was extremely legendary. Don't get me wrong, it was absolutely amazing, but he didn't do anything crazy. I think Alex Becker, another somewhat famous internet marketer, certainly someone I first learned from way back in the day. I saw a post of his on Facebook and I thought he said it probably the best, which is where Alex Hormozi didn't do anything incredibly spectacular in terms of like uniqueness. You know, it was just the fundamentals of direct response webinar funnels done extremely well. Like he tapped into every single fundamental and he didn't do a 10, he did an 11. And he did a very, very, very good job. Now, why am I bringing this up in this podcast? It's because you would think from this launch, Greg is wrong that you should have a personal brand. After all, that is how Alex got so many people to trust him to do this amazing launch. And he did, in fact, build an audience first as Alex Hormozi for acquisition.com before he really ever sold anything. You know, when he first started, that was the line, I got nothing to sell you, all that kind of stuff, right? And this is his moment where he's doing the jab, right hook in the same, language as Gary Vaynerchuk, right? This is his left hook or right hook, whatever the line is to cash out on all this goodwill he's built with. Absolutely great. But and I'm going to go into this in a little bit. That webinar funnel is what I would call a slow. So in marketing, a slow is self-liquidating offer. You have something on the front end that you can use to monetize and break even on your marketing costs because you have something on the back end you really, really want to sell, but it takes a very, very long time before you can do that. And I'll get into what I mean by that. But Ironically, despite all of this, I think Alex would agree with me a lot about what I'm about to say about personal brands. So I wanted to share another story here, and we'll get into why I think personal brands kind of suck in a lot of ways and when you should use them. And again, I think Hermosi agrees with me because I feel like he's done everything I am about to say. So first off, a few months ago, actually, this is more like a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years at this point, I was in Cyprus giving a speech like I usually do about buying and selling businesses. And at the end of the speech, me and the other speakers, we got into this panel and the audience asked us a bunch of questions. And I got asked a question about personal brands. They asked me, how can I make one like yours, Greg? And I kind of laughed because I really don't think I have much of a personal brand. Like, I don't actively try to build a personal brand. I just do this content at Empire Flippers because I think I'm one of the better ones to do it. And in fact, I'm trying to get our CEO to do more because I think he's great too. And I'm a big fan of a brand not being beholden to a single face. But, anyways, so I get asked this question and I respond back, well, that depends. Like, do you want a big business or do you want a small business? Like, what's your goals? And he's like, I want a massive business. So I told him, well, you shouldn't focus on a personal brand at all. It's a waste of time. And one of the other speakers, they gave a whole speech on doing a personal brand for your agency. So obviously they were not like super excited with what I said, right? Because I was basically refuting their entire speech, which I really wasn't. Like, I thought that speech was really, really good and had a lot of value. But what this person was asking me, like, I don't think a personal brand really makes sense for what he wants to do. And I told him, like, think about it. What is the personal brand of IBM? Who is the personal brand of Chewy's? Who's the personal brand of Microsoft? Who is the personal brand of Walmart? You think of all these massive businesses. Like, you think about David Ogilvy, like a master legendary marketer. Well, who's the personal brand of Ogilvy Advertising, which is arguably the largest marketing agency in the world? No one. Like, that is a business named after a guy and doesn't have a personal brand, right? So this is what I mean. Like, if you want to go big, if you want to go real, real, real big, personal brands often are this trap that keep you very, very small. Now, before I go into the trap, maybe we should discuss a little bit when you should use a personal brand, because I'm not naysaying personal brands 100%, but as a little bit of foreshadowing, at Empire Flippers, we've sold over 2,400 businesses at this point, made 90 millionaires at the moment of exit. The real number is well over 100 in my view, because we don't count businesses that were sold at 900K or whatever, right? But out of all those businesses, literally thousands of businesses, I cannot name more than, like, off the top of my head, only two of them came with any kind of personal brand at all, and they were very difficult to sell. The sellers probably are not thrilled with the kind of multiple they got and the valuation they got. Very hard to sell. So I have a lot of like breadth of experience with a lot of non-personal brand businesses, and I do think they are largely superior. But let's get into why you should do a personal brand. One of the scenarios where it does make sense to do a personal brand. So when it comes to a personal brand, what are we trying to do? Like, what are we trying to do for our business? Usually the answer is we are trying to build some kind of trust, because a face, a personal brand, is going to build a lot more trust on average than, say, a corporate logo, right? That's just the nature. Humans trust humans. They don't trust brands. Now, over time, humans do trust corporate brands. They do trust these different types of brands, and they even forge an emotional connection with those brands. So it's not impossible. It just takes longer, and it takes more resource, and it takes more time. So personal brands can shortcut all of this, right? So one of the areas where I think personal brands are really, really good, or types of businesses, I should say, is service-based businesses, where there often is more of that one-to-one kind of selling process at times. Not always, but often there is a need to have like someone in the loop to discuss the service before you buy it. Another common business model where personal branding can make sense is, say, like info products, consulting, coaching, any of that kind of stuff tends to make sense. Like, a marketing agency is a great example. Most marketing agency owners have a personal brand, or they're attempting to, I should say. And so this does make sense in a long sales cycle where a lot of trust is needed, that you shortcut that by using your face, right? Now, when you're starting out, I think that is the best time to use a personal brand, because when you're starting out, what do you need? You need revenue, you need profit, you need to keep the lights on, right? So the best way to do that is speed run your way to trust by using your face, using your voice, your own insights, your own connections, right? You're doing what doesn't scale to put you in a position to scale. And I think personal brands are great when you're starting out because the first people you should reach out to for almost any new business you start, especially service-based businesses, is people you already know, people that already know, like, and trust you, right? Like that is you using your own, personal brand in that sense to get some revenue. And also when you first start out, you being in the content on the web page and the marketing funnel, all of that makes a lot of sense because you need to speed run trust to put yourself in a position where now you have the testimonials, the case studies to actually scale. Now, most personal brands are very suitable for B2B. There are a few niche cases where B2C does make sense, but it's very rare to see a personal brand with e-commerce, for example. And again, this goes back to my belief that I'm challenging you with at the beginning of this video is like, or with the Cypress presentation, like, who is the personal brand of Chewy's? Who is the personal brand of Home Depot, right? Like there is none. They don't really have one. Now, there are some e-commerce companies that do have a personal brand. I think of my buddy Kevin Espiritu over at Epic Gardening, personal brand, right? But his business has grown far beyond that personal brand. Most of the time, what we see with personal brands is people in the B2B space or some niche B2C like dating or health and fitness, stuff like that, where often there's a low amount of trust in that niche, in that audience. And so you need to get over it. And one of the ways to get over that lack of trust is, again, having a bit of a personal brand. So after all of this, you might be wondering, like, well, I brought up Hormozi, right? He's obviously not starting out. He's spending 250 grand a day driving people to a webinar with him and his wife on it, right? Like, clearly they're investing heavily into their personal brand. So doesn't that make everything I'm saying not really make any sense anymore? Like if Hormozi's still doing it when he's clearly not just starting out? And I would say no, because what he's doing is the second scenario of when I recommend to use a personal brand. You see, when you're starting out, being a personal brand is amazing because it gets profit through the door. It gets customers in. And people are more willing to take a risk, a bet on a person, a face, than a logo. But later on down the road, the second time to use a personal brand is when you've quote unquote made it, when you become a made man, a made woman, whatever, the Goodfellas talk, the made man. This is the time when it makes sense to do another personal brand, another like, real emphasis on your personal brand, because now you have an exceptional story that allows you to have exceptional leverage. And that exceptional leverage allows you to do an even bigger exceptional thing. So it doesn't always make sense to do this second deal with a personal brand, but it can. Like in Alex Hormozi's case, it absolutely did, right? Like what he was doing was his second personal brand. He's doing the second scenario after he's already made it. And I'll sum this up with another story. So I'm in a marketing mastermind that people pay a few $100s a month for. It's basically a chat. There's some weekly live calls, a lot of cool people in there, a lot of great marketers, a lot of great thinkers, right? There was this guy, he posted in there saying, hey, I am making as much content as Hormozi is, basically. Like obviously lower production value than Hormozi because Hormozi's spending like 80, 100 grand a month on content creation. But this guy, he is producing a similar amount of quantity, right? And he's just not getting any results. And he asked, what am I doing wrong? So I replied to him like, well, have you sold a $50 million business? And he said, of course not. I have not. Like, there you go. That's why your results are different than Hormozi's, because Hormozi has a story, an exceptional story with an exceptional outcome, which gives him exceptional amount of attention. And he leverages that story like crazy, especially in his early stuff when he was first splashing onto the scene. Now he has some other stories with his growth of acquisition.com that he can use. But when he first came on, like $50 million man, $100 million leads, like all that kind of stuff, right? So he's leveraging an absolutely exceptional story. But this marketer that is just like killing themselves with a 20, 30-hour content grind a week does not have an exceptional story. Yeah, they got a profitable marketing agency. They're getting leads, all this kind of stuff, but it sucks. It is a grind. Like this organic personal brand content, like he's just not getting that much attention. He would have been better off spending that 20 to 30 hours and whatever money he was putting into the organic content in just running client acquisition ads. In fact, I have a buddy, he started off with his marketing agency that was all organic and his personal brand, all that kind of stuff, right? Get those free leads. But The thing is, when people talk about that, they think it's free, but it's not, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and probably money too, because you need to edit it, you need to make it look good. Like this podcast itself has a very low production value, but we're still paying our editors to help edit it when Greg makes a stupid mistake, right? So like it's not free, and we might get some leads, we may not, right? We don't know because it's hard to know with organic. But my buddy, he switched all of his organic stuff to just a paid acquisition funnel. His business went from maybe seven figures to now like $8 million is probably what he's going to exit for, 7.5 to $8 million. And he did that all in just a couple of years when he stopped being a personal brand and he started focusing on growth. So again, to recap, personal brands are fantastic when you first start out because you need to get the profit. They are awful when you're trying to scale, but they become great again once you have a great story. Because once you have a great story, now you can command a bunch of attention. If you're just another marketing agency owner making good money with a profitable agency, but you don't really have that great of a story. There's a lot of you out there. What makes you so exceptional that I'm going to stop my scroll on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever, right? Not much. Like you are one of many people with a successful agency, right? So you really need to hone in on an exceptional story if you're going to do the second part of personal branding, like what Hormozi has, at least in my view. Now, Hormozi actually did this, in my view, with both his gym launch business and then later with acquisition. So if we look at gym launch, when it first started out, he was personal brand DMing everyone to get it going, right? But later on, he didn't really focus that much on organic content. Yes, he did have some organic content, but that was by no means his main driver. And I think he even admits to that. His main driver was advertising. That was where he really cut his teeth, not personal branding, not content, none of that stuff. All that came later. In fact, he's quoted, if you go look at some of his stuff earlier on, where he didn't like organic content. He thought it was kind of a waste of time when he could just run ads and get so much more leverage. But organic content is fantastic when you actually get the momentum going. But with Gym Launch, he actually scaled that on the back of paid media, not on the back of a personal brand. Now, yes, he was in those ads, at least initially. But as he got closer and closer to the exit for Gym Launch, he slowly replaced himself to where he was no longer in the ads. I believe it was his second command that became the person in all those ads and all that advertising, right? So therefore, no longer a personal brand. There's no personal brand to speak of, right? Sold the business. Then a bit later, probably had a little bit of a rest. Who knows? Alex, I don't think he really rests. The guy's a workaholic, but he went and did his second rodeo with the Alex Hormozi acquisition.com personal brand and started splashing on the screen. But see that transition. Started with a personal brand, didn't really do, like, he still had one, but it was a very small portion of his business. And then he grew that, sold the business, exceptional story. Now he's coming back in with a personal brand that can capture an entrepreneur's attention in a real and meaningful way because he's done things very few people have ever done. It makes it worth paying attention to, right? So if Alex Hormozi is doing what I'm saying, where personal brands don't matter as much as you think, why is he investing so heavily now after he's become a main man? Like I said, I mentioned you want to do this second personal brand after you have this exceptional story, but you only want to do it if you're trying to do something equally extra exceptional that you've never done. You're trying to get to the next level, right? So I mentioned at the top of this that Alex Hormozi's entire webinar funnel is, in my view, a self-liquidating offer. So a self-liquidating offer at the very basics is I sell an ebook through Facebook ads for $20. And then you buy that ebook, that $20 either covers my ad costs or brings me a little bit of profit, effectively making my Facebook ads for free. And then I upsell you on what I really want you to do. Now, in this case, what does Alex really want people to do? He wants them to sell their businesses with them. And now, what do we know about selling businesses? It takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of trust to be able to go to Greg and sell your business with Empire Flippers. There's people I've been talking to in my Facebook DMs, LinkedIn DMs for years before they decide to finally exit their business with us. It just happens. It takes time to build this kind of trust. So what does he do? He skirts through that whole thing with his own personal brand, speed running trust, right? And he builds this webinar funnel knowing that the sales cycle can be a long time. Like he might be waiting a couple years before a deal really bubbles up. So he needs a lot of shots if he's going to go fast. but to go fast costs a crazy amount of money. It's not unreasonable to spend, say, $10,000 just to get one business for sale. And you don't even know if you're going to sell that business, right? So it's not that uncommon. And that's a lot of money to be spending week in, week out when your sales cycle is, say, like 2 years. So how do you do it? You speed run that trust. And in that speed run, you also create a slow. So his slow is the book, and then the $6,000 offer, then the $25,000 offer. It wouldn't surprise me if in his CRM, whatever he uses, anyone who bought that 25K package is marked as like an MQL tier A. So MQL stands for marketing qualified lead. Usually you have multiple tiers. My guess in his CRM, everyone that bought the 25K deal is a level MQL for him to start having a sales conversation with them about acquiring their business. Now, the other thing that happens here from an M&A perspective, buyers can get much better deals if they are known, liked, and trust. What Alex is doing, he's speed running trust hard. He's giving you all these frameworks, playbooks, blah, blah, like overwhelming you, which is content marketing 101. If I wanted to sell you something that I do that is like somewhat complex, one of the first things you do as a content marketer is write it all out and give it away for free. So that way someone doesn't even need to use you. Like they don't need to hire me to help them sell their business. Here's a whole article on how you do it. But what happens psychologically is like, man, Greg, this is awesome. Or Hormozi, this is awesome. Could you just do it for me? Right. And that's the nature of selling more complicated services. You overwhelm them. Here's exactly how you do it. And they're like, wow, Jesus, this is amazing. Can you just do it for me? So in the context of Hormozi's slow, what's happening here is not only are they paying for all of this marketing, and I'm assuming he made very good profit off of this, not just break even like a normal slow. Like I think he closed like $80 million. So like, yeah, like he $100 million models is like living up to the name, right? So he's very unique in that usually a slow breaks even or does a little bit of profit, but he made it like crazy profitable. But it wouldn't surprise me when he gets on these calls, because I've actually listened to other people on calls with him that were like looking to have him buy their businesses, that he has built so much trust through all of his content marketing, and people who have done the yes ladders who buy into that funnel, they trust him so much. Now he has this a superpower to where he can go and acquire companies for little to no money down. I would imagine he uses very little of his own capital to acquire businesses and even less of financing. Like maybe there's a little bit of capital, a little bit of finance, but my guess is the vast majority of people he talks to that he doesn't acquiring, he bakes into the deal structure growth, and he knows how to grow things. We've seen it publicly with acquisition.com. We've seen it with his exit with Gym Launch, all that kind of stuff, right? So he's able to negotiate this amazing deal because he has so much trust. Like any other seller looking at a Hormozi deal would be like, if they didn't know it was Hormozi, be like, what a ripoff. Like, no, I'm not giving you all this equity on the promise of growth. What are you, a madman? But Hormozi, speedrun trust, has a slow, gets people in yes ladders, blah, 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 blah. Boom. Personal brand, a lot of trust, a lot of leverage to making good deals. So you're like, Greg, well, personal brands sound awesome. And yeah, they are for what he is doing. But think about this. In Alex Hormozi's portfolio of companies, which I believe I met him a couple years ago at an event in Beverly Hills. I believe at the time he had acquired, I think, like 8 businesses or something like that. I'm assuming now it's much more over 8. I know he's just like the CRM is like chock full with opportunity. So I imagine I wouldn't be surprised if he has a portfolio of over 20 businesses at this point. But if you look at all of his companies that he has in this portfolio, that probably is making him a lot more money than what he's doing on the personal brand side. Certainly when it comes to the long tail of everything, he will be making a lot more money in terms of that equity value of those businesses as they grow. And they have a lot more leverage because you can't really scale a personal brand very easily. Now, Hormozi's done an amazing job on that. He's probably one of the best, along with like Gary Vaynerchuk back in the day, right? But it's just like these other companies have way more leverage in his personal brand, and they're probably going to bring him in a lot more money and a lot more wealth creation than anything he's doing with his slow, with the acquisition.com website or anything like that. And the thing I want you to think about here, like, well, personal brands sound great, Greg. Well, where is the personal brand of these companies, right? Like Hormozi doesn't really use his personal brand that much for his other portfolio companies. I can think of basically only one company he's acquired to become a co-owner of where he mentions it at all, and that's School, right? Like in that case, the synergies between School and the Hormozi brand, fantastic, right? This is a fantastic thing because it's all about education. He does education, and his whole point of education is part of a content marketing funnel to get into a slow to eventually acquire you, right? Once you do everything he's telling you to do and puts you in a position where you trust him so much, you're going to give him an absolutely amazing deal, right? But if you look at all the rest of his portfolio companies, he really doesn't talk about them that much. In fact, I remember him telling me the reason why he doesn't is because he doesn't really want these businesses to rely on him. He wants them to rely on themselves. He wants them to grow on their own. And he doesn't want to cash in his own personal brand equity on some random business that is like somewhat unrelated to what he's talking about, right? Because he buys more than just like B2B companies, right? So this is all very, very smart. And again, what I would recommend, because if you build a business that is scaled on a personal brand, that business is inherently weak. You cannot exit it very easily. It's very hard for you to transition out of it. You are the business. You are the linchpin. And when it comes to M&A and when it comes to valuations, I always joke you want to be the most useless person on your team, because if you are completely useless, when someone goes and looks at buying your business, they're going to pay you a very premium price for what you've built. Because if you are truly absentee, that means you have a machine of leverage, and buyers buy machines of leverage, and they'll pay very nice pennies for it, right? They'll make you a millionaire many times over, depending on the size of your business, happily, right? So that's what I mean. Hormozi is using his personal brand as a way to speed run trust to get all this deal flow, but the rest of his businesses aren't really driven by a personal brand at all. So let's get into, kind of bring this all home, why personal brands are pretty bad when you start scaling them up, at least. And the first one is way lower leverage. You can't be there all the time, 24/7. Like now with AI, sure, like a shittier version of you can be there all the time. And hey, I've experimented with it with some success, but you can't be there all the time and doing content constantly, being on the road, being at conferences constantly, being in these masterminds, all this type of stuff. It's a lot of work, and the ROI is often not very clear when you're doing this, because like they heard you here. It's a very non-linear marketing journey that you're having people go on, and you're never quite sure which one was it. Like a great example, I did this podcast a few weeks ago from the time that you're watching this, at least I believe it'll be a few weeks ago from the time you're watching this, where I had two people reach out to me that basically led to $7 million in opportunity pipeline for Empire Flippers, right? But both of these people knew me many, many times from a lot of different pieces of content, and they had followed me for years and years. So who's to say it was that podcast or is this or is that? It's really just time in the game. My buddy Eric Sue, I asked him once, like, how do you meet all these like amazing people? And he's like, I don't know. I'm not even that good at talking to people. Most people think I'm kind of a dick at times, but I'm just, time in the game, I guess, like, which I love. It's totally true. Time in the game, right? I've been doing content for years and years at this point about Empire Flippers. So a lot of people know me. They'll reach out to me personally. And that's like a mini Empire Flippers funnel that is like no ability to do any attribution, right? Now, with that said, I'm only one person. I can't be everywhere all the time. And there's other things I need to do outside of just content, right? So, very, very low leverage is one of the big reasons I think personal brands really struggle. Like, once you get beyond that startup phase to that kind of mid phase where you're scaling the business, what got you to that mid phase won't get you to the next phase, right? You need to adjust and reevaluate how you are doing these systems, because growing a real powerful personal brand is hard and it takes a lot of work. And like I said, in order to really stand out, you need an exceptional story if people are going to give you an exceptional amount of attention. Now, with ads, with paid media or say SEO, you don't need an exceptional story. You just need a rank. You just need an ad that converts, right? You still need a story in terms of marketing to get people interested in what you're talking about, right? You need that ad to be interesting, but you don't need an exceptional story. Like you don't need some insane background guru like story to build and sell 7 figures worth of dog food, right? just need to know the story of your avatar. It doesn't need to be a personal brand. There might not even be a person in the ad, right? It's probably just a dog. Like when it comes to scaling, there's often a lot better methods that are easier, in my view, than a personal brand that doesn't come with these caveats. Because again, when it comes to selling this business, personal brands make selling your business absolutely miserable. And I'll get into that in a second. But before I do, the other thing I want to bring up is like, are people buying things from your business because they like you or because they like the business and what they sell? So the personal brands can muddy these two things. Like if Hormozi went and announced all these companies that he acquired, like go buy them, and it's like something random, like something for your grass, maybe about a landscaping company, right? My guess is he has so many followers that are in the cult of Hormozi, which I don't say that as like a negative thing. I think he's done a great job with that. Like you want these like hardcore brand evangelists that every marketer desires that. But these people that are in the cult of Hormozi, Mozi Nation, as he says, right? They love him so much. They're going to go buy a crazy amount of this stuff for the grass. They may not even have grass. They just want to support the guy, right? Like that sounds crazy, but people do stuff like that all the time for their heroes or role models and stuff like that. And Mosey has definitely built himself up in that way for a lot of these people. And I've seen it happen so many times with like completely random things like you didn't really need that. Like, yeah, but I like Greg, and that muddies the entire water because now your personal brand is like a band-aid for a business that's not very good, that it can't exist on its own, right? So you don't really want to muddy those two things. And personal brands really can muddy the waters of that business. But let's move into the most important thing, at least in my view, as an Empire Flippers guy, the most important thing. Personal brands are miserable to sell. So obviously it's your face, right? Like if you had a personal brand in fitness, say you had a fitness coaching program that's doing, I don't know, 100 grand a month in profit. You have a 7-figure business. You try to go sell that business. And because you're like this ripped 25-year-old dude with a six pack and you look like an absolute beast, someone like me buys your business or like a 65-year-old investor with a beer belly, no way. They can't replicate you. They're not you at all. They're completely different, right? Their entire business relies on you. So this becomes not an unsellable business. I used to say that's unsellable. It's not unsellable, but you will get a fantastically low offer and you're going to get a very low amount of cash in addition to that wonderful, incredible low multiple. So you're doing yourself this massive disservice because businesses, one of the most beautiful things about building a business isn't just the money you're making today, but the value and the wealth you're creating 2, 3, 4 years from now. Like I have a friend, he sold a business for, I think it was like $14 million a few years ago. Dude has several other businesses. He's like super chill. He doesn't really do anything. I have friends that work for him and they're like, I don't know how to even get a hold of him, man. I actually need him for something urgent, but he's just like so lackadaisical and ever getting back to me at this point, right? But he could not have sold that business if it was a personal brand. And the business he was in actually would have worked well for that starting scenario of personal brands. And a lot of other entrepreneurs would have made the mistake of really turning themselves into the face of this software company, right? Which I've seen happen before. And that would have torpedoed his ability to sell that business for over 8 figures, and a large portion of that being cash in his wallet, right? So anytime you put your face on the business, you are devaluing the business. Now, you might be thinking, like, well, Greg, you're doing that with Empire Flippers right now. Like, well, luckily for you, as my buddy Justin says, I'm just a cog. I'm an employee, right? I'm not the owner of Empire Flippers. So actually, me doing this content is a value add to the actual owners of Empire Flippers because it's not their faces, right? They don't have a personal brand. And like, I don't really think I have a personal brand. But if an investor or acquirer went and bought Empire Flippers, I would most likely be coming with the deal and still be doing this, right? Because I am not the owner. So usually when the seller sells the business, the seller doesn't come with the business. Now, in certain cases, they certainly do, but most of the time, the seller's off doing something else. So if your goal is to build a big business where you can sell the business and make a true life-changing amount of money, personal brands are bad news bears. Don't do it. Okay, we're wrapping this up, and I wanted to talk about the quote I mentioned at the very start of this video, which is build an audience first and then sell to the audience, and why I think that's wrong. And I think this is very similar to the personal brand problem because both of these tend to go hand in hand. Usually, when people are talking about that, they are also talking about building a personal brand. And like I said, I used to believe in this. I used to think this was right. I no longer believe this. I think this is actually very bad advice. So we'll wrap up this podcast talking about why I think this is bad advice. And I'll do this with a story. So one of my buddies, he is absolutely ripped. He used to be obese. He got himself into massively good shape, one of the best transformations ever, and I like was honored to see that transformation, like done an amazing job. So he wants to start a YouTube channel related to fitness because ultimately he wants to sell a fitness course, right? Or maybe a fitness app, something like that, right? So he decides to build an audience thinking, hey, organic content from YouTube, this will be great. And I told him, do not do that. You're going to waste a lot of time because what converts on organic content doesn't necessarily translate to paid media. And also, you might have to do things in terms of organic content to stand out, to actually get views that is so distant from your actual goal. Like you're doing like this sub niche and a sub niche and a sub niche that is now very unrelated to what your digital product was going to be, right? Or whatever your product might be. And so now it's very hard to translate these two things. But the other issue too is if you build, say, a massive YouTube subscriber base, and then you get a product, you can't really talk to all those subscribers. You could talk to a very small percentage of them. Your next video that you post, where you maybe put yourself as sponsored for that video, sure, you're talking to some of them. But the vast majority of those subscribers, of those organic views you built up, will never see your offer. And they might have saw your offer if in your video you always had an offer to begin with. Like in this case, build an audience first, then sell later. So there is no offer while you're building up the audience. But this is bad advice. What was better, and what I told him to do, is instead of taking all this time, like if you factor in all this time of the 6 to 8 months to build up a good steady Eddie YouTube channel, when if you just took $500 to $2,000, throw it into meta ads, build a landing page, don't even build a product, and see if anyone joins your wait list, or you can even have a dummy credit card information, or you can just refund them and tell them the product is not ready. See if anyone wants what you're selling first. Because once you find out what they want and that they are actually buying, complete strangers who don't know you at all, they're willing to buy that product from you. Now you got a winner for content, because what's going to happen is you're going to make money right away. So you have profit right away. You don't have to wait the 6 to 8 months for a hopeful launch from your organic content. And you're building an audience that's not just an audience, they're an audience of customers. These are customers, which means they like you a lot more than a random YouTube subscriber is going to like you, right? You're building an audience of customers right out of the gate. But the other thing, because of the way organic content works, you don't always know what's going to work for your offer and what's going to work for organic. And what I mean by that is like you might do like vidIQ, TubeBuddy, do like this deep amount of research for your like the competitor gaps on YouTube and then make a video about that. But that thing might be very unrelated to your product. And these two things don't even convert, right? People watch this video, they splash on, splash off, and they're over here. Like a few years ago, we got onto the homepage of Reddit. Massive traffic spike, very little amount of leads because they all splashed off, right? Versus if you start with this method where you're starting at the bottom instead of the top of the marketing funnel, where you're trying to get random strangers to buy something from you with an ad, when that works, when you get people to actually pay you money, what do you know? You know the offer that works, you know the angles of that offer, and now you can take those angles and take that offer and turn that into content. And because you have an audience of customers who are probably going to be a lot more engaged than a random YouTube subscriber, you can seed your organic content with those customers to your Instagram reels, to your TikTok shorts, right? YouTube shorts, all that kind of stuff, right? You can seed your audience to all these different places and jump that organic flywheel much, much quicker. And you actually have profit to begin with. Because what works with a paid ad, an actual ad that's converting someone into customers, that is speaking to someone on a pretty emotional level to get them to stop the scroll and buy something from you when you're a total stranger to them. If you take that same thing, that same offer, and translate it into content, it will also work. Versus if you try to translate the vidIQ video you did competitor research on that got you a tons of views into a paid ad to your product, it most likely won't work. Paid ads, one-to-one to content, tend to work pretty well in terms of the content, but organic content to paid ad often does not work well. They don't translate in the same way. But the other thing that this does for you, if you're really gun ho on building a personal brand, if you start this way first, you can know your offer is so good, it doesn't require a personal brand. But to wrap up what I was saying about my buddy, like if you do it this way, where you build the ads first and then go to content, that is way, way, way better. And it saves you so much more time versus trying to struggle with these personal brands. Like I said, personal brands can be great for your business, but if you want to follow the Hormozi strategy, most of his wealth, at least before acquisition.com, was largely created without a personal brand, in my view. And I think that's the way most entrepreneurs should also view themselves when they're going and go create their business, right? Like personal brands are fantastic at the start, and then they're fantastic once you have an exceptional story and you have a goal to do something even bigger and more exceptional that needs to leverage that exceptional personal story. But most businesses do not require this. The vast majority of businesses do not require this. The number one plumber, number one roofer in your local community probably does not have a personal brand. They might have personal relationships, but they're probably not doing a lot of personal brand stuff themselves. And most businesses that we have sold on Empire Flippers have had zero personal brand. I cannot think out of the 2,400 businesses, more than two that come to my mind that had a personal brand. Now, out of those 2,400 businesses, like I said, we made 90 of them into millionaires. Some of those entrepreneurs do indeed have a personal brand, but their personal brand is so unrelated to the business that they have built, it doesn't really do anything. Just like Hormozi not revealing like the rest of his portfolio that he bought. Like if he did, I imagine a lot of the companies he acquired have really nothing to do with the B2B space at all, most likely. Who knows? Maybe all of them do, but I think a lot of them probably don't. Probably a lot of them are more B2C, where it wouldn't really make sense anyways to use his personal brand. But the TLDR of Greg's long rant is, if you want to build something big, personal brands are great to start with, but don't get stuck in the personal brand trap. And it's usually a lot better to get strangers to buy something from you from your advertising than it is to try to build an audience first and then sell them something. You get way more power because you have an audience of customers versus an audience of subscribers. And an audience of customers you can reach out to pretty much anytime you want via your email, right? Versus an audience of subscribers, you really have no way to connect with those people. And those people don't like you or trust you nearly as much as your list of customers because those subscribers simply haven't spent any money with you. And money is usually the ultimate litmus test in business if your thing is going to work or not. And if you do it without a personal brand and you can make it work, then it will certainly work with a personal brand. And you can certainly grow it without a personal brand. And you can make a life-changing amount of money when you come to someone like Grandpa Empire over here and decide to sell your business. So that's my rant. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Props off to Hormozi and his team. That was an amazing launch to watch from kind of the sidelines. I've always been a fan of the what I call the dark lords of marketing, and Hormozi is kind of the apotheosis of direct response copywriting legends, all like blended together into a super jacked dude. So that was fun to watch for me personally. But hopefully you guys found this helpful along with my other solo podcast. If you do, leave a comment because we're posting this on our YouTube channel as well. So you might be watching this and think like, wait, he has a podcast? And like, yeah, I do. I have a podcast called The Opportunity Show where I interview typically a bunch of different variety of entrepreneurs. Like we had a guy on just a few weeks ago that is spending $300,000 plus per year on his AI stack, which is mostly his like token expenses, which is amazing. They're trying to build, I think it's like a $20 million ARR company with like 3 co-founders and no employees. The AI is the employee for everything. So go check out that episode. It's pretty recent. But if you've never listened to our podcast, come over to empireflippers.com, go to the podcast section and check out The Opportunity. If you are listening to this on the podcast, I thought like, wow, Greg has a YouTube channel. Like, yeah, I have 2. We have one that we normally post this podcast on, and then we have one that's more talking head videos of just Greg talking about something, though more production value than what you're seeing here. Because in this one, we're just doubling up to promote the 2 shows. So with that said, come give me a subscriber on YouTube, come give me an email opt-in on the podcast, and come become my customer by buying or selling a business with us. Who knows? Maybe you will be millionaire 91 that we create. Talk to you soon. there you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.